when was the last time particularly that you saw the Flames and the volume get this high on the Miami Heat? Because a lot of people right now are mad at Barry Jackson because he's reporting the Miami Heat's quote-unquote plan, and it isn't much of a plan. And the internet is pretty mad, okay, at, in general, what's happened to the Miami Heat. So you've got Evan Parsons, 85, saying this is the type of that pisses me off, them running propaganda ops through their big three, Barry, Ethan, and Le Batard. That's not going to work anymore. And now whenever I hear them talk about the team, I feel like I'm being played. Biscayne, Maine says, Heat culture is all about taking accountability unless you're the architect of the franchise putting together these teams. Big idiot Heat guy says, find someone who's willing to make excuses about you in the same way Pat Riley is willing to make excuses for the mediocre-ass roster he assembled. And then Greg Silender, the writer, says, a close friend who's been a Heat fan since before Riley just texted me, yeah, I'm out.
They're just going to continue to tread water, which is what the one thing that Heat fans didn't want to see after the years of frustration finally caught up to the majority of the fan base. There were subsects of the fan base that were like, I don't think this is the right path.
I mean, I'm aggravated. I haven't been aggravated like this, and I don't know.
You should be. I was talking to Billy before the show. I'm like, their plan is essentially to run it back, and he correctly said, well, they're not running it back. Duncan Robinson isn't here anymore. They might actually be worse. Their plan is... There is a part in this article of Barry's, which is the Heat don't feel like they actually got a fair shot to evaluate the roster because of all the chaos Jimmy Butler caused. Yeah. Again, not exactly accepting your accountability on your part in the Jimmy Butler mess, Miami, but that's fine. They also blamed Andrew Wiggins' ankle injury. They want to develop these young assets, hopefully trade for a superstar, but there is a huge flaw in the logic, and even Barry Jackson admits this. Say they develop guys. They already have two all-stars in Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. Their package, if they went all in on trying to acquire a superstar like Giannis, they don't have a good hand compared to Houston or San Antonio. They're still falling short. And the reason why they don't want to go in the other direction and tank is because they point to several examples of where tanking doesn't work. They don't point to the Oklahoma City Thunder where it does work spectacularly. Do they not have confidence in their own ability to rebuild the roster? Their best trade assets are the two All-Stars, Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo. We got a season. They blamed the Jimmy Butler chaos, but we got...
The Rockets tanked too, correct? The Rockets also tanked and got rewarded for tanking.
And they took your lunch money on Kevin Durant, and they still have plenty of assets to go ahead and beat you to Giannis. So
okay, but that part's not hard, why they're not willing to do the tanking part. Riley's 80. That's why. Like, that part's not hard.
But, okay, so what's more important? Riley's age? And I'm just asking this question because you could answer that Riley gets to go however he wants because he's the godfather and he brought us all this success and he made the franchise relevant. But what is more important? Riley's age and his timetable or the betterment of the franchise?
I want to ask you guys a number of questions related to that point right there, okay? That he just mentioned, because this is the loudest I've ever heard it around Pat Riley. Jeff Teague is saying, quote, you know what's so funny?
What do you have to say?
What Pat said at the end of the year. This won't be the same team as last year. Yeah, well, you're right. Actually, it won't. You let Duncan go, you got worse. Unless they are about to get Bradley Beal something or end quote.
It's right on the money, and Pat said that.
It's not right on the money. The move that Jeff Teague wants him to make is getting Bradley Beal?
No, it's right on the money in calling out what Pat Riley said at the end of the year, which got Heat fans excited. All right, the Godfather finally realizes he got hit in the face with the biggest blowout in NBA playoff history. There are changes coming. And the changes are Duncan Robinson isn't going to be here anymore. That's true. Now, the Bradley Beal thing, cast that to the side. But it's absolutely a fair accusation, and to me, it leads me to believe, wait, there is an alignment here in what Pat said and what the final verdict was. So who's in charge?
Zaz, let's do this, because I will say, when you say who's in charge, this is an interesting one, right? Because I floated this guy to you guys before, because this is a bit of a crossroads for the Miami Heat. And I've told you the inner workings of this team aren't what people think it is. The people who run this team are Mickey and Nick Arison. Nick is Pat Riley's boss When Mickey Arison came up through the cruise line industry, he was put in charge of everything when he was 30 years old, and he did the same thing for his son with this organization. And I'm not positive that Nick and Pat are connected right here. Where Pat is at 80, I want to win right now, and I don't know if Nick would rather have the draft picks or not, and I don't know what kind of tension it might cause, because it has caused tension, and it's not big tension, but how do you imagine Pat Riley feels about reporting to Nick Arison, who used to be a ball boy? How do you imagine that would go in the places where there's disagreement and Nick has to win things? I don't know. I don't have the answer for you on how often Nick is overruling Pat, how often Nick is the deciding vote in the vote of 5 among the group of 5 that make the decision. But I will keep telling you again and again, and no one seems to know this, the person that Pat Riley reports to is Nick Arison.
But Nick was probably 10 years old when Pat Riley got here, right? I'm being serious. Like 19. He was probably 10 years old, something like that, and now it's his boss. But wouldn't you assume, if we're just using common sense here, wouldn't you assume the CEO, who is Nick Arison's age, whatever he is, 40, whatever he is, and Pat Riley, who's 80, wouldn't you assume that they're on completely different sides of how to move forward with this team? Like, wouldn't that be common sense?
I think the way, though, that it comes off, whether it's intentional or not, is when it's good times, it's Pat Riley. When it's bad times, he can't do anything. It's not his fault. His hands are tied.
What I'm telling you, though, is that Pat's not going to he's not going to go for 6 draft picks like that. He's not going to do that. You guys got to tell me whether you're okay with this. This is what you have to answer for me if we're going to go ahead and flush out this hypothetical. You guys good with Pat Riley just stepping down because the Heat decide to go to rebuild?
Yeah.
Am I good with it if that's what he decides on?
No, but he would be being forced out because they're running the organization differently than you guys want it to be run and differently than he would want it to be run.
I just want the franchise to get to being a contender quickly.
But how long is his leash is the question, right? Because like everyone's like, yeah, Pat can go out on his own terms, but like if this is just the same thing every year for the next decade, how long is it going to be he can go out on his own terms for?
Here's a couple of things that have bothered me about Miami Heat fans pushing back on this notion. Everyone points to the 2 finals in 3 years, and you got to
pushing back on the notion that Pat Riley,
that he's done and that he's cooked. Look, man, they won 2 Eastern Conference championships. Number one, the roster's totally different right now. Number two, that was a long time ago because the Dallas Mavericks were. It was a long time ago. The Dallas Mavericks were in the NBA Finals more recently than the Miami Heat, and they were a punchline come Martin Luther King Day. So we were all laughing at Dallas, but apparently we can't laugh at Miami for being the same kind of disaster. I genuinely don't know what is the quicker path to being a contender. Writing it out, and presumably they hope that they can develop the young guys into assets that can somehow usurp the package that Houston and San Antonio could present for a superstar, or just saying, Bam and Tyler are our best assets right now. Let's get a bevy of picks and do it the Houston way.
I think the most damning thing about the Heat and Pat and just like the front office right now is it's crazy to say, but it was 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, you had LeBron James, you had Dwayne Wade, you had Chris Bosh, back-to-back titles. You were the toast of the town. You were the team everyone envied in the NBA. People hated, whatever, right? You took the town from the Dolphins. And in 10 years, you're on the precipice of losing the town to a hockey team.
Yep.
Well,
a team, you're trending towards losing the town to a hockey team that historically Miami has not cared about.
Yeah, that's not true. I mean, as much as I love the Panthers, and the Panthers, I mean, essentially get my attention first these days, they're not in jeopardy of losing the town.
You think if you go around the town, everyone's like, the Heat, the Heat, the Heat?
It's 2 different towns.
Yeah,
We're talking about Broward and Dade. It's 2 different places.
Yeah, there are incremental gains in Miami-Dade, and they're going to have to keep chipping away. Like A.J. Greer is having a party in Westchester tonight. That's something that would.
Whoa, what's going on there? I don't know about that.
A fourth-line winger is going to a local brewery to celebrate the Stanley Cup in Westchester. It boggles the mind.
Is he going to have the cup? He's not going to have the cup. They're putting the names on it right now,
they're
right?
engraving it right now.
To be fair, though, to what it is the Heat have built here, just to be clear, and Zaz is right about this, the Panthers are becoming something that is more of a Dade County team. The Heat, over the virtue of the last 20 years, are Dade and Broward. They're not just Dade.
No doubt. But to Billy's point, Greg Cody wrote an entire column on this, is like the shoe's on the other foot now. The Panthers are what the Heat once were. And the Heat,
with the great management and the winning.
In terms of where they are as a franchise and getting close to a championship and the perception and the respect that they garner from around the league and what the fans actually feel about their team's chances, the Miami Heat are stuck in the middle of no man's land right now.
They are, but let me just stop you guys for a second on what it is you're doing. First of all, I want to ask a question. Mike has now used this expression a handful of times over the last few weeks. He has commented on the taking of lunch money. Are we still doing lunch money given that we're not doing cash anymore?
No, actually, the bill that just passed made sure that there is no more lunch money and no more lunch
just
period.
Passed. The big, beautiful bill just passed this morning at 6 a.m.
Well, part of the deal was they can't call it that anymore because that triggers people.
All right. But lunch money, physical lunch money, is that something that bullies still take? Put it on the poll at Le Batard Show. Is lunch money still something that bullies take? But the place that I wanted to stop you guys, and forgive the fire alarm, we're going to just blow right through it because we're on live and we don't care. And
we didn't get the preemptive. This is just a drill today.
Right. We will continue to ignore these until one day we get the viral moment of all of us going up in flames here because we've ignored the fire alarm again. But the thing that you guys do, and this is really easy to do, right? Because we all get to be general managers and no one holds us accountable for when we get it wrong. You say the Heat have failed the last few years. Well, you guys didn't want Harden. You didn't want Kyrie Irving. You didn't want them. They were both available. They've just signed quietly elsewhere. It seems to have worked out. You didn't want those guys. You wanted Dame. And if you'd gotten him, you wouldn't be real happy right now if Damian Lillard had also gotten here. So all your moves end up working, even though they don't, because Harden just signed quietly with the Clippers. Hasn't been an issue there. They love having him, $40 million a year. Kyrie Irving just signed quietly with Dallas. Doesn't seem to have any problems there.
I don't know if what you're doing is right. Again, apologies for this fire alarm. That does not shut the up.
I can't hear you.
We were talking about Tyler Hero for James Harden. That was an actual debate, and a lot of people felt really strongly about getting James Harden. Kyrie Irving had a lot of off-the-court stuff going on at the time.
They both did.
And this was at the time where Miami was actually competing for Eastern Conference championships. But there were plenty of arguments to be made, and I think most people landed on whatever the franchise decides on. Damian Lillard, yeah, we wanted Damian Lillard. Miami Heat wanted Damian Lillard too, and they approached that like total all right, and they failed. In fact, every example that you cited, Miami kicked the tires and tried to put together something to get these players, and they failed.
My biggest problem with the Heat's plan right now is they are seemingly, it doesn't have to be seemingly, their MO is to have all these assets, young players, whatever draft picks they have, and they are waiting for a star player, a superstar player, to get upset with his current situation, and then they are going to pounce. And to me, that's not a plan. Like, hoping that someone gets, because it's plentyfold, where you're hoping for someone to get angry enough to want to be out, and then you're also hoping for that team to be willing. You're not just convincing a free agent to come to you, it's you have to convince that team to then send him to you. But in reality, that player has to make a mess of the situation so that it doesn't matter if another team has better assets than you. And that, to me, that's not a plan.
Okay, you say it's not a plan, but I would say that it's been the transplant plan of Pat Riley since he got here. Go get Alonzo Mourning. Go get Tim Hardaway. Go get Jimmy Butler. Go get LeBron James. Like, he hit on Wade and changed his entire philosophy as, okay, I will trust young players. I'm not going to do it anymore the way that I did it with the Knicks and the Lakers.
Yeah, but what happens with Duncan Robinson, who's one of these guys who's on your roster who you don't end up trading because you believe in him, and now he's gone anyways. So you never traded him for a star, and now you got nothing in return for him.
That's true, and you got a player that you invented out of nothing, as you've gotten the reputation for doing since drafting Dwayne Wade gave you the opportunity to change your entire philosophy on how it is Pat Riley does things, because he now does trust young players in a way. That was the biggest knock on Pat Riley. The only knock on Pat Riley is he will not allow young players to grow. But when you say that's not a plan, what do you mean? Miami's a transient community, and this franchise is absolutely has rested for the last 15 years on the plan of we'll wait until somebody's mad where they are and we will get them because we have better tax breaks in Florida.
But they don't get them.
Yeah, that example right there has not happened since Goran Dragic.
No, it happened with Jimmy Butler.
He's a free agent, though.
Yeah, but he was unhappy where he was, and they got Jimmy Butler when they didn't. When
But
no
look
one
how,
thought
look how
they
that
could
played
get
out
Jimmy
too,
Butler.
though. Like you get the disgruntled guy, and then he comes in and he's disgruntled and he makes a mess and throws off your
What
plan.
do you mean? How did that work out?
It
It worked out
worked out.
spectacularly.
No, it didn't.
They-
This is championship culture. They didn't win a championship.
they-
Like, don't come with this bullshit of we're going to win the
Okay,
championship or
but-
bust and
no,
then not win
no,
a
but
championship.
here's
Like,
the
but we
thing.
got super close.
But
They
here-
failed him, and the Sixers, he wasn't disgruntled. The Sixers chose Tobias Harris and to move the roster in a different
He
direction.
was disgruntled with wherever he was in Minnesota and Philadelphia. He wanted his money. The thing that you guys are doing on this, though, is that Jimmy Butler failed, but Kyrie Irving hasn't, or James Harden hasn't. Like, they were the available guys. You wanted them. They've been successful, but they didn't get ultimate success, so they failed. They just got Harden and Irving just got re-signed because they failed in Dallas and Los Angeles.
I'm not going to go as far as to say they fell short of their ultimate goal, which is a championship. They certainly, Coach Spoelstra certainly maximized the talent available on the roster. Pat Riley did fail because it was clear as from the day that we acquired Jimmy Butler, they needed a player better than Jimmy Butler to win a title. Now, Jimmy Butler made us think about that more than twice with incredible playoff performances, but the fact remained they needed to get somebody better. They knew this. And along the way, players like that popped up that did the things that you want the disgruntled superstars to do. And the Miami Heat were in the mix. And usually that resulted in the Miami Heat getting those players. They didn't.
They chose not to. Like, they
routinely.
didn't want to go all in to support Jimmy Butler for some
They
reason.
didn't want to go
And
all
then
in on
he,
Lillard.
historically, who's a disgruntled person, became disgruntled again here because he felt like he wasn't getting the support that he was asking for.